Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Money Matters podcast, the show where we discuss important financial topics that were never covered in med school. I'm your host, Dr. Tarang Patel. This is an important episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. We're talking about balance billing, surprise billing with Dr. Amy Cho. It's a topic that's been in a lot of the news feeds lately because obviously when someone goes to the hospital or especially the emergency room, they don't have a choice in who they see. And a lot of billing happens that physicians or other services are provided. Even if the hospital is in network, the covering emergency physician may be out of network. And a lot of this has been portrayed as something that physicians are doing to make us look greedy. And we all know that we are far too busy to be involved in that type of deceitful behavior. And most of this comes placing physicians as pawns between hospital systems, insurance companies, corporate medical groups. And yet somehow we get painted as the bad people involved in all this. So it's an important episode. I encourage you to listen to Dr. Cho, and then I encourage you to go out and contact your congressional representatives. It's extremely important that we get involved in the politics of this because so far it seems to be mostly the insurance companies and their so-called independent think tanks that are giving their input into this. Hospitals are doing a little bit of it, but they're not looking out necessarily for the best interest of their physicians. So please, please, please get involved and contact your congresspeople and tell them your thoughts on the surprise/balance billing issue. Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Dr. Money Matters podcast. I have a special episode today. We're going to be talking with Dr. Amy Cho about a topic that's been in the news very recently, and it's being highlighted as a patient issue, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, and that's surprise medical billing. So we're going to get into it a little bit about that discussion. I'm going to have Dr. Cho talk about it because I've seen her thoughtful perspective on the various social media channels. And it's a topic, like I said, that we're being asked to address. And a lot of physicians are being vilified by this topic. So before we set our political agendas, things like that, we should really understand what the topic is. So I want to thank Dr. Cho for agreeing to come on this show. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision and get her schedule arranged. She has 4 young children and then I have 3 kids, and we all know how busy physicians are in general. So I really do appreciate her coming on the show. Dr. Cho, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you and to hopefully educate some of our fellow physicians on this issue that I believe is of incredible importance to our profession. I'm a practicing physician. I'm an emergency medicine physician. I'm starting my 10th year of practice out of residency. Before I went to medical school, I actually worked in business. I was a consultant at a Bain & Company, and then I worked at a startup venture capital fund. And in medical school, I also got my joint degree. I got an MBA at the same time. So I've been practicing as a physician in an independent group. I haven't been particularly involved in legislative issues until this issue came up. And the reason I'm getting involved is because I believe that it has the potential to be very disruptive to the healthcare system and will directly impact physicians and cause significant cuts in our compensation.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on, and especially with the background that you have in the business world, consulting. I tend to be pretty hard on the role of business people and administrators who are non-medical in the healthcare world. So I'm glad you're able to actually bring both sides of the both perspectives to this matter. So let's just get to it. So, what is surprise billing?
Well, surprise billing is what we have typically referred to as balance billing. So when a patient comes to a hospital, the hospital can be in network, and the physicians who are providing the services to the patient can be out of network with the insurance company. And because those physicians are out of network with the insurance company, they can send a full charge to the patient that is not discounted. They don't get the contracted rates because their insurance company has not contracted. The insurance companies in turn refuse to pay it, and the patient is left with this balance or surprise bill, which is oftentimes significantly higher than what they would get if their insurance had contracted. Additionally, to add insult to injury, that balance bill, that large bill you pay, doesn't apply to the deductible in the same way. So I had this happen to me when I was traveling for a conference. I broke my foot. I went to an in-hospital network, and I got an absolutely gigantic bill from the out of network physician, and I had no way to know that they were out of network. And then that gigantic bill did not apply to my deductible.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we hear stories, all the time about astronomical medical bills and medical bills being a leading cause of bankruptcy in this country. And we as physicians, we are villainized a lot of times because we're the face that people see. But most of the time, we're not the ones setting these bills. We don't really have a choice. At the same time, it's difficult to challenge insurance company practices in this matter. So, what do you see as? Why is this in the news now? And has this been going on for a long time, and we're just hearing about it now, or is this something that has been kind of much more of a practice recently?
I'm not sure how long it's been going on for, but it is, I think, in the news because it's becoming more common, and it's also been in the news because there's been more attention to it from journalists and from academics, and I think it probably is occurring more frequently as private equity-owned contract management groups have purchased up and rolled up physician practices. They have used practices like balance billing or surprise billing to put pressure on insurance companies and to get higher contracted rates. There was a paper out of Yale University that looked at this particular issue and demonstrated that a small portion of the market, mainly dominated by a few of these contract management groups, have been very effective in using these tactics in negotiations and increasing their prices. Now, I think it's important to point out that those groups make up a small portion of the market, and they're big versus the remainder of the market, for at least for emergency medicine, which is highly fragmented. The majority of the remaining physicians are independent groups or employed hospital groups, and they don't do this.
Yeah, the paper you talk about, I remember seeing that. I don't know if I didn't see the original paper, but I think it was referenced in the New York Times last year, and they actually mentioned a couple of the private equity companies that were, very prevalent in doing this. In fact, one of those firms purchased the emergency medicine group at the hospital that I work at, and I know they were, well above the standard rates in terms of what they had the article had listed. So, I get back to the point that I don't think it's the physicians. Obviously, one physician who may be in control of the group may have an idea about this, but I don't think most physicians have any idea about the rates that we're setting. I mean, especially in emergency medicine or fields like mine radiology, where we deal with a lot of emergency patients, or fields like anesthesia, where you're not really controlling your patient flow. We're not really setting the bills, and we don't really understand how this works. So maybe some physicians at the executive level understand that, you can make a little bit more by setting these rates out of network. But the reality is that we're just too busy seeing patients, and it's more of a business decision by the executives at not just the practices, but and most, like you said, the ones who are private equity or investment owned. But it's also a decision by insurance companies not to really negotiate fairly. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I do think it's accurate. In the negotiations and contract negotiations between physicians and insurance companies in the fields of radiology, emergency medicine, pathology, anesthesia, and other fields where the majority of the work is done in the hospital, insurance companies are able to negotiate with us and know that we are subject to EMTALA laws. So when insurance companies negotiate with, say, an orthopedic surgeon, they need something called network adequacy. They need a big enough network of physicians to service their patients that they are willing to make concessions on price and give a fair price. For these specialties that primarily work in the hospital, they know that they don't need network adequacy. Because under EMTALA, we are required to provide services to any patient that walks in the door, regardless of the contracted rate of insurance or regardless of whether they pay us at all. So there's no such, the concept of network adequacy means nothing in terms of access for patients. So the only negotiating leverage between these physicians and insurance companies is out of network status and price. So the only reason that they would negotiate with us at all is because they get a better contracted rate for their patients. So,
yeah, I mean, so basically, we as physicians we're kind of handicapped, or we're playing with one arm tied behind our back because we have to comply by the EMTALA rules and they don't.
That's correct.
And so I think, again, this has been an ongoing battle, insurance, hospitals, physicians, for generations now. But it seems like, it's just becoming a more and more difficult and sometimes antagonistic relationship. And that's, unfortunately, that may be one of the reasons why so many physician groups are probably, one of the advantages they see in merging with other groups and forming larger entities and then being bought out by private equity is that they feel like they're not able to negotiate as well independently. And part of the reason is because of these type of situations where we're kind of outgunned. We have rules that hold us back, whereas the insurance companies don't.
That's absolutely true. That's a big driver of consolidation among physician practices, is the need to have some leverage and negotiating power, whereas we don't have it otherwise.
Right. Unfortunately, the more, and I'm not criticizing you as an MBA, but I always say this: the more MBAs we add into healthcare, the higher our costs continue to go without any proof that the healthcare is actually getting any better.
I don't disagree with that. I think that more physicians need to start either educating themselves or going back and getting their MBA if they feel like they need that to speak up about these issues. But I guess I would encourage every physician out there to not be afraid to speak up and push back, because we're the ones providing the care day in and day out and who understand these issues and understand that some of the business tactics that are suggested don't make a lot of sense for our patients or for us or for the healthcare system.
Right. Well, getting back to the surprise billing, I know I was talking to you a little bit offline about this. So it was an issue when I went to the American College of Radiology meeting in DC this spring, and we were encouraged strongly to talk about this with our representatives. And so I guess the question, and there was some solutions proposed, some arbitration, solutions. Do you have any idea of what's happening now in the political spectrum? Because I know there was something very recently talked about. We want to get something done by the end of August.
Mm-hmm. So there's different legislative solutions that were considered, and so the devil's really in the details about how this is solved. I don't think any physician is really excited about the idea of some profiteering, corporate entity making money off of this and off the backs of patients. We all want to stop this, but the different solutions have very different potential outcomes. So there were the Senate Help Committee passed a bill out of their committee onto the full Senate, and that bill included a potential solution called the benchmark solution or benchmark legislation. And it's really important to understand what this is. So the benchmark legislation says that any patient that comes to the hospital, to an in-network hospital and gets services, gets billed at the median in-network contracted rate for any services that are provided there if they are out of network. So that sounds fine at first blush. It sounds reasonable and fair, but when you think about what happens down the line, it's very problematic. And this is the main concerns that a chorus of emergency medicine physicians and other groups have. It puts us in basically a nutcracker situation, or some call it a pincer situation. So if a patient comes to the hospital and they're out of network, they get the median in-network price. So the insurance companies, 50% of them are above that median in-network price. And so they have that 50% of insurance companies has no need to contract with us, and they actually get a better deal if they don't contract with us. So they drop out of the insurance market contracting with us. And then what happens is that mathematically calculated and mandated median will drop. And it will continue to drop and drop and drop. It's a race to the bottom, to the floor, which is Medicare. And so the problem with that solution is that it's basically a mathematical certainty that the price will drop to the floor of Medicare. I mean, I just can't see any other possibility there because there are no safeguards in the legislation to prevent that. Another option that most of us support as the best and least disruptive option that would solve the profiteering problem is called independent dispute resolution, or IDR. And this is what's occurred in New York. It's baseball-style arbitration, and it's been surprisingly effective at getting rid of these high outliers, decreasing costs, and actually with very few of these cases going to dispute resolution. What that is it's not arbitration like we go and we have a discussion or a debate about it. There's an independent arbitrator who, and the physician group and the insurance group put forth their best offer, and they only get one chance to do this. The arbitrator looks at some various databases and tries to figure out what the best option for pay is, and they pick one of those offers, and it's final, it's binding. They're instructed to look at the 80th percentile of charges because there still needs to be some incentive for the insurers to come to the contracting table and to negotiate. And in New York, it's been, they've had a 13% decrease in physician charges overall for emergency medicine physicians. So it's actually saved money. And only 0.0113% of cases have gone to arbitration.
And when the arbiter picks one, it doesn't necessarily set a benchmark. It's just a case-specific choice.
Right. It's a case-specific choice. It's case by case. It has to be done within 30 days. It's quickly. The patient, most importantly, the patient is completely out of the middle. So, the insurance company has to pay the balance that is determined by the arbitrator.
And I remember, when we were talking to our congressional people, the New York rule, as you talk here, was the one that we were encouraging they adopt, and it seems like that's you made a really good explanation of why. where do you have any idea where we are in terms of what's going to be happening at the next congressional session?
So before they went on August recess, the Senate Help Committee passed their bill, and they had the benchmark solution. The Energy and Commerce Committee in the House had debate about this, and they were going to pass a bill that was likewise a benchmark. It ended up with passing out of committee with some additional, some additional amendments or additions to it. One of those was Representative Ruiz's recommendation to include independent dispute resolution. So it's similar to the HELP bill. It also added in something that they would use a 2019 database to figure out what the fair charge in median network charges are, and then they would use like an inflation adjustment over the years, and they would have independent dispute resolution for any bills above $1,250. So there's a few problems with that. It would protect us from the race to the bottom because it uses the database from 2019, but it's rather complex, like the SGR methodology of the past. And 2019 is not over. We've already heard that insurance companies have refused to contract with longtime partners, physician partners, in an attempt to change that in network median benchmark. And then $1,250 as a threshold for dispute resolution is multiple times more than our average bill. Almost none of our bills would qualify for that.
There was a little bit of back and forth on Twitter recently, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a economist who was presenting to I don't know if it was a congressional committee or not about this topic. And you had, kind of brought back some of the points. Can you kind of talk to me about what are the dangers of some of these people who are not physicians, giving their perspective as an economist rather than practicing healthcare professionals to Congress? And what are the dangers for Congress people to listen to them and not us?
Well, I think we need to be an integral part of this conversation, yet we really haven't been. The economist you talked about, he's with the American Enterprise Institute, and he was able to testify to Congress earlier in the year about this. And, he argues that this outcome that we fear will not happen, and uses some pretty, some confusing economic arguments in my mind. So, a lot of the physicians are concerned, I think rightly so, that if our compensation drops 40%, who's going to want to go in and work on nights and weekends and in rural hospitals? Like this, we know from Econ 101 that if you have a price that is set by the government, or if we allow the insurance companies to set this price far below a market value, that there's going to be shortages. People will retire early. People will work less. People will find a side gig. People will, run their real estate businesses. They'll do other things because it's not tolerable. Yet these economists are saying that that's not true. They're actually impugning us with rather interesting language to say that that's not true, and they refuse to talk about these possibilities that we are concerned will occur. Additionally, they never testify or talk about EMTALA when discussing this with the legislators. I mean, EMTALA is like the elephant in the room, and they never talk about it. And I think if you're not in medicine, even if you're not in, emergency medicine, you may not really understand the impact of EMTALA.
I was just going to say that. Tell, for my listeners who are not who deal with emergency medicine or any emergency type situation patients, tell me what EMTALA is, just at a base level, so that they would understand. Because you're absolutely right. Most people and many in healthcare don't understand what EMTALA means.
Yeah, so EMTALA is a great law that it was implemented to prevent patient dumping. And let it, some people were apparently letting patients die in their parking lot rather than take care of them because of insurance or payment concerns. EMTALA, is one of the reasons I went into emergency medicine, because I see every patient regardless of their willingness to pay or their ability to pay. But EMTALA has huge sway. So if you are a physician working in an emergency room, you have to see every patient that walks through the door, regardless. If you violate EMTALA, you are subject to a $50,000 fine. It's a personal fine. Your liability insurance doesn't cover it. It's a pretty influential carrot, I guess, or stick to get you to do what's right for patients. But the implications of this are huge. So, emergency medicine physicians, probably 30% of our care is free. Emergency medicine physicians are 4% of all physicians, yet we provide 2/3 of uncompensated care, or for patients without insurance, we provide 2/3 of their acute care visits, and we provide half of all CHIP and Medicare visits. So, like people in private practice can say, I'm only going to accept this percentage of Medicare patients because it pays so poorly. Emergency medicine physicians and all of the other physicians that we work with in the hospital, we don't have that option. So our compensation is actually, or our reimbursement, if you're an independent physician, is actually completely based on the payer mix of the hospital. So it's who walks through your door and whether they pay you or not, or what rate they pay you. So we don't have an option to not accept insurance at a lower rate. We have to do it. In fact, in the emergency room, we don't even let the patients get registered with their insurance information until after they've been seen and evaluated and treated, because we don't want to bias them. So it's not some evil physician saying, "Oh, this is so exciting! Like, you don't have insurance, we can bill you at a higher rate." I don't even know.
Right, and that's the thing. I just to clarify, EMTALA stands for the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act. And it's from 1986, but it does exactly what you described. And unfortunately, the reverse isn't true. The insurance company, in fact, a lot of rules were being passed, or at least there was conversation about earlier this year about some of the larger health insurance companies being able to deny reimbursement to the patient after the fact. I mean, it's not like the patient could go in, have their emergency care, and then later on the insurance company can decide, okay, that didn't warrant emergency care, and then therefore any care you provided and any ancillary care in the hospital is just basically unreimbursed care, and it's not. I mean, they don't have to play by the same rules, but yet when that patient showed up, you had to do everything you could for the patient. So I think that's the biggest thing. You're right. Congressional people, economists, all these people, and a lot of people even in our medical world don't quite understand the grasp of that. You don't have a choice when that person comes into the emergency room. You have to treat them. It's ridiculously unfair that when they have insurance, the insurance company can then decide, okay, well, we don't have to provide it, because later on, once they have all the data that you didn't have, they can say, well, that wasn't emergency care. I mean, it's backseat driving or Monday morning quarterback, whatever you want to call it. And it's one of the reasons that doctors are so frustrated with the entire process. We want to provide care. You want to provide the best care that you can to the patient when they come in. And we don't want to have to deal with all this other stuff. And yet that's the stuff that's destroying us. These other people coming in and going to Congress, speaking, relatively uninformed, and to be quite honest, our own politicians are very uninformed about this. And, I know they need to know a million things, but it's just more important than ever that physicians get involved. Not just in organized activities such as, like I was talking about, my American College of Radiology participation or whatever society you're in, but also just engaged at a more local level, because that, that kind of activity, discussion, social interaction with the politicians actually probably holds more sway than when you just come in to see them once a year for your society. But so I really, appreciate the work that you're doing, and you're doing a tremendous job educating a lot of our physician colleagues on social media. One thing that I wanted to touch on was a article that came out recently. I think I sent it to you a little bit, and you've actually had posted a while back. It was from the RAND group about what was happening in California when, insurance basically. What was that? I'm just trying to think. It was, when they were capping the rates or surprise billing.
So California has been trying to implement a similar law with a benchmark, and I believe they capped it at 125% of Medicare, and so it has given. So it's a benchmark at either a percentage of Medicare or I think the median contracted rates. It's been going on for about a year or two, and the RAND study looked at it and found that it has done exactly what we feared. It has given insurance companies very strong leverage to unilaterally decrease rates by a lot, like 30% or more, and it has driven independent physicians to become employed because they can't run their businesses like this.
It's and those who can, I mean, not necessarily emergency medicine physicians, but specialists are opting out of participating in emergency coverage. Is that correct?
Yes, they did find that, and that's from the perspective of emergency physicians, that is extremely worrisome to us. If you have a patient come in who has an epidural hematoma from a fall, they need care and they need it quickly. Why would a neurosurgeon agree to be on the call schedule and take care of, to get called in the middle of the night and have to rush into surgery when they know that there's a high litigation risk from ImTeleCare, and now they're not going to get paid well for this? What would stop them from leaving the call schedule and just doing their, single level spine surgery at an outpatient surgical center?
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the, it's that second order thinking that I feel like is never seen. I mean, obviously, it's not just you are risking so much when you to take care of emergency situations, and at the same time, we want to do what's right, but you can't do what's right if it ultimately is going to come back and negatively impact you in the long run. So what you described is exactly what's happening. I had a colleague of mine recently, a radiologist here who used to work for a hospital facility and recently joined a outpatient only imaging facility, and said, I can't believe the difference in my quality of life. And you know what? But that leaves if enough people start doing that, we're going to have such a void in our healthcare, and it's ultimately going to harm patients. So I want to thank you for doing what you are doing, and I just want to ask you one more thing. Where can people learn more about the issues that we discussed today?
Well, I think if you belong to one of your professional organizations, that's a great place to start. There is a consortium of professional organizations that have put together a coalition and a website called outofthemiddle.org, and they have a lot of great information. They have a lot of public-facing information as well. I think that's a great place to start. I have written a few blog posts that try to explain this information and explain my concerns about what will happen from an economic standpoint, as well as from a personal standpoint. And I'm happy to share those with people. There's, if you get on Twitter, there's, people could follow you. People can follow other physician advocacy leaders who are trying to work on this issue.
Good. And as far as any suggestions on should they be contacting their representatives, congressional people?
Yes, I urge everybody to contact their congressional representatives. I would urge every physician to put aside your specialty tribalism in this, because this threatens our profession as a whole. It's a part of a larger effort to rate set for physician services, and really to we are viewed as commodities, as waste to be cut. And we aren't. We are the heart of the relationship in medicine, and we provide the value, and we also are the people who hold the knowledge that would help us to improve our healthcare system. So every physician really should get involved. I know it seems like a crass issue. You may not care about it, but it really threatens our profession. The things you can do that are most effective is calling your senator, calling your representative, telling them that you are concerned about this and that you want an opportunity to talk to them about it. I have personally met with 5 of our state senators and representatives, either personally or through their aides. It's actually really easy to do. It takes 5 minutes to call the aides in their offices. They just write down a tick mark to say what you said and what you supported. You can email them. If they email you back, you can respond to them and ask for a personal meeting to talk about it. It's been very refreshing to talk to the people working in government and explain this to them. And frankly, once you explain it to them, they seem to get it.
That's so true. It's amazing, how this process works, and they are, I get it. Like, these representatives, senators, they need to know about so many different issues that it's the key thing, like you described, is actually getting and talking with their aides. And these are bright people, but they're young, most of them, and they don't think, they just haven't been around long to understand a lot of the issues. And so, it's important to clarify. A lot of them don't understand the difference between, an emergency medicine physician or, some other physician who may happen to, work in the emergency room. Or in my area, a lot of them didn't really quite understand the difference between what a radiologist does and what a X-ray tech does. So, sometimes at base level, we do need to educate these people, but we have to continue to educate them because they're the ones who are writing the positions and encouraging the people they work for how to vote. So the more we can get out, the more we're doing, the better we're going to be for our profession. But not only that, realize that the people on the other side, the insurance companies, they are employing vast amount of money to counteract what we're doing. And if we are too busy to do this, congressional people are only going to hear one side of the story, and you can believe that if they hear one side, that's the side they're going to believe.
They're only hearing one side. They hear these experts who fail to mention EMTALA. They don't understand the issues, and I don't blame them, because unless you work every day doing this, you may not understand it. And physicians really need to wake up. I guess I didn't understand this before, but the insurance industry is funding studies. There have huge influence and sway in this activity. There's an organization called the National Institute for Healthcare Management, which sounds great. It sounds like the NIH. In the past 5 years, they've given $2 million in grants and financial monetary awards to academics and to journalists. It's completely funded, founded, and run by insurance company executives. There was a JAMA article that came out, I think, 3 days ago that was funded by this organization. It's not, unfortunately, so the Economist paper from Yale that I talk about, it was funded by this organization. It's not, we need to understand what's happening, that we really have to get involved to push back against this. And we need to, because, they're very smart. I assure you they are getting a return on their investment for that money. They're getting, a tax break because it's a nonprofit. But more importantly, they're funding research and journalism articles that seem unbiased, and so they get legislative influence without lobbying. So it's a big problem for us.
It is, and then they're called upon as experts. I remember getting into back and forth earlier this year with another economist about physician salaries, and his idea to cut barriers for foreign physicians, to come in without residency training, and I was like, that's an insane idea. And of course, his response was, "You're just trying to promote, protectionism." I'm like, no, there's ways to have physicians come in here. They can apply for residency and just demonstrate, that they can go through the training. And not only that, but bottom line is, it came out, someone else pointed out that a lot of his funding for his think tank was actually funded by insurance companies and by large pharmaceutical companies. I'm probably getting a little bit of the details confused, but basically he was not independent by any stretch, and he was funded by the companies that actually want to counter physician and portray physicians as the problem, the problem in healthcare costs. So, and unfortunately, they have the time to go and speak to congressional people while we're out, working all hours of the night, especially you guys in emergency medicine. So, we could go on forever about this topic, but I wanted to get this one out there because I think that it's such an important issue. It's such an important issue that's happening now that our colleagues, again, like you said, no matter what the specialty, we as physicians need to unite together and make our voices be heard. So I want to thank you, Dr. Cho, for coming on the podcast and explaining the issue and encouraging our colleagues to get out there.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Dr. Money Matters. If this is the first episode you have heard, I appreciate you taking the time out and listening, and encourage you to listen to our past episodes. I would also appreciate you leaving me a positive review on Apple Podcasts, and also recommend you join our Facebook group where we have ongoing discussions about this and other topics in order to help each other reach our financial goals. Finally, I encourage you to subscribe to our email list and also to subscribe to the podcast itself on the various podcast app that you use in order to be kept aware when the latest episode comes out. More episodes of this podcast are available at www.drmoneymatters.com and on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Audio versions are also available on YouTube and Facebook. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Money Matters or on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Money Matters, all spelled out. Thanks for listening, and if you get a chance, please leave a positive review for this podcast as it helps move the podcast up the rankings on iTunes and gets it exposed to a wider audience. Thanks for listening once again, and stay tuned for another episode coming soon.